an artist of the floating world, but my colleagues actually do the other texts. So we do a lot in High Schooler magazine, which you can find in the Daily Nation every Monday. Like my colleague, Mr. Karaoke, has already alluded, I do have a blog post. I'll share that link in the comment box. Maybe later on at the tail end of this presentation, as we finish, then maybe you can access my blog from the comment box. Now, having said that, we can begin our lesson today. We have about 2 hours to cover English paper 3. And I think that is enough time to tackle the most pertinent bits of English paper 3. English paper 3 only has 2 questions. That is the imaginative composition. And then we have essays based on set text. Those 2 bits. Essays based on set texts cover one option or one compulsory text. This year we are dealing with Fathers of Nations. Esther Waithira, please mute your mic. We have Fathers of Nations. And then for the compulsory text, we have about 3. Those 2 questions are the questions I would like us to handle today. But
sorry for that, Mwalimu, you can continue. I think I've muted you accidentally as I was muting the others. Mwalimu, you can continue.
It's okay, Bwana Mtiso. I was saying, as we were preparing for this lesson, I agreed with Bwana Karaoke that we could do question 2 and question 3, and then in our later arrangements, maybe we can look at question 1 if time does not allow us today. But if it does, then we're also going to look at
Okay.
I will go straight to Fathers of Nations. Now, students, in Fathers of Nations, we clearly need to understand. We clearly need to read the mind of the setter, the mind of the examiner. So I want us to begin with, what does the examiner look for? What does the setter look for? The first thing you should consider is, once you are given a question, can you correctly interpret the question? So number 1, under objectives, under test, let us, if you're noting it down, let us talk about what is the, we are testing the correct interpretation of the question. Can the candidate correctly interpret the question? So that is number 1, interpretation of the question. Number 2, once you have interpreted the question you have been given, you need to go back to the text. That is Fathers of Nations. That is a silent song. That is an artist of the floating world. That is Parliament of Owls for this year, or the Samaritan. If you are taking the test next year, can you cite sufficient illustrations from the text? Those 2 things. Interpret the question correctly, cite sufficient illustrations from the text. Now, as we mark this paper, one of the things that we see is that many candidates have some challenges. For example, some of you cannot cite enough illustrations from the text. Others cannot give the background information. Other candidates have a problem when it comes to mastery of the content. They have not mastered the content in the. So those are some of the things that I would like you to consider when you are studying the text. Those are the challenges. Now, the only way you can overcome these challenges if you find time to read these books sufficiently or enough times. Do not wait for your teacher. Do not wait for your parent to push you. Do it on your own as a student. Now, I want to give you a formula in which you can read the books. And the formula is very simple. You have to divide the text into episodes. I don't want to make it look complicated. I want to simplify it further. Nikisema divide the text into episodes. I simply read Fathers of Nations. It's not 100. Look at us. Sections that you can read independently. Page 1 up to page. Let's go to page 1. Page. Then that is the arrival of the 4 Path Alpha travelers at the Seamount Hotel. That is an episode on its own. And then you can then also maybe let us just go randomly and then talk about maybe page 21 up to page 45. And then you can call that the story of Professor Kimani, because Professor Kimani's story is elaborately narrated by Paul B. Vita from page 21 up to page 45. But then the gist of Kimani's story is page 21 up to page 38. Then from 38 to 45, that is when he meets somebody called Tad Longway. That is an episode. And then you can go further and break down Kimani's story and say, page 21 up to page 22, we have the rise of Professor Kimani. Kimani goes from Oxford University. Then he goes to the University of Nairobi. Then you know what he does at the University of Nairobi. I don't want to take time on that. Relevance to society, or talk about the motto. He wins. And then he wins another thing. He gets a campus beauty called a CEO Monde. Then he becomes a professor. That is the rise of Professor Kimani. In fact, on page 22, we are told, had anyone told him this happiness would one day end as it did, he would have laughed himself upside down. You see, that already tells us that that is an episode, the rise of Professor Kimani. Then when you proceed, we have the depression. When the country goes into a recession, you can read, that is between page, you can start at page 22. And then as you go further, you'll get to a point where we have Professor Kimani's problems or the wars. That can also be termed as another episode. But that aside, look at somebody like Engineer Saif Tahir. And I'll direct you to page 117. And you can read that up to page 125. That is the story of Engineer Saif Tahir. That is an episode on its own. If you want to maybe study Ngobile Melusi, go to page 82 and read all the way to page 99. That is Gobile Melusi. Okay, so ideally, I'm just trying to cite the fact that you can only cite illustrations from the text if you know where to get certain information. So that is one. Get the event into episodes. And these are the who are the characters involved. So talk about the characters that are involved. Now look at example of somebody like Dr. Folabi. Dr. Folabi has a wife called Pamela. And if you're studying the story of Dr. Afolabi, and you're looking at page 66, and you're going all the way to page 81, but the meat or the beef of Dr. Afolabi's story is page 75 up to page 81. So who are those characters between page 75 and 81? Because once you know that, you will have evidence, textual illustrations to answer any questions that is thrown your way. So if you have characters in your name, like you say, of course, we have Dr. Folabi himself, the wife is Pamela, the white woman from Boston. You have the houseboy who's called Isa, whom we meet on page 75. We have Femi, Dr. Folabi's cousin from Kaduna. We have Nimbo, the young lady who was brought by this Yoruba man to be married off to Dr. Folabi because the wife has refused to give birth. But the Yoruba people of Nigeria feel like the wife is unable or to give birth, or she hates children and has refused purposely to give birth. But she has given a reason. You know, Pamela says Africa has too many children. There are more children than roads in Africa. There are more children than hospitals in Africa. There are more children than stadiums or factories or industries in Africa. So why should we give birth to children when we can adopt the ones that are already there? But Dr. Afolabi says, listen, I want children of my own because in Africa, children are valued according to Dr. Afolabi and according to Africans. And Pamela does not understand that. In fact, if you invent a cure for cancer today in Africa, you will not be respected than that person who has 20 children in Africa. So Dr. Folabi knew that, like he's a doctor, he has his PhD, he has his education, but he has to have children of his own before his Yoruba people can respect him. Anyway, that is besides the text. We have to stick to the details that are in the text. So who are the characters involved? Then number 3, apart from just knowing the characters, knowing their roles, spelling their names correctly. Like for example, we have somebody called Rahma, and we meet Rahma on page 119 of Fathers of Nations. Ensure you spell her name correctly because Rahma has Rahmah at the end. Mahmoud. And don't call her Rehema Mohammed. We only know of Rahma Mahmoud. If you call her Rehema Mohammed, I'll say Mark, but I will feel like you didn't read the book. So if your friend is getting 3, for that point, I'm going to give you 1 because you're not spelling the names correctly. Or I can even decide to give you 0 and defend myself that this candidate did not read the text. So spell the characters' names correctly. Apart from giving the event and the characters involved, you also have to give the actions of the characters. And I want to insist that this is very important. The idea of the actions or activities that are performed by the characters. Once, as you read the book, I want you to be very, very keen on what each character does. What do the characters do? Do you know what the characters do? Let me give an example of Professor Kimani. I've already told you that his story begins on page 21 and it goes all the way to page 45. But the juicy bit or the sweet part of the story begins on page 29. Page 30, when the daughter dies. Page 33, when the wife leaves him. So if we're talking about his actions and we're talking about something like he decides to go and seek revenge when Walomo steals his wife, in quotes, steals his wife. Because a wife is not like gumboots that you can forget outside your home and somebody steals them, or shoes, or slippers. But then in the book, he accuses Walomo of stealing his wife. So what action does he take when the wife is stolen? So you have to be very keen on the actions of the characters. Kimani proceeds to Walomo's office. The first thing he does is to confront him. You know, the whole idea of brushing off the secretaries when they block his access to the closed door. Then he bursts into Walomo's office. Then he greets him on page 34. You fat baboon. Then he repeats the same words on page 37. You, greedy fat baboon. You can say that action is abusing the member of parliament or insulting the member of parliament. So we have one action that he performs. Do we have another action that he performs? Let us go to page 37 of Fathers of Nations. He tries to attack newborn Walomo. He swung a fist. He missed for stealing his wife. He swung another fist. He missed again for mocking him. And then he swung a third fist and he lost his balance and fell. Still on page 37. So the second action is trying to, you can say assault, you can say fight, you can say beat, you can say attack. Use any word that you want to use just to show that this person is annoyed or angry at Walomo. That would be another action, part of the action or activities performed by the character that is trying to assault or fight the member of parliament. That would form part of the action, the things that he does. And then you can also talk about the questions that he poses when he meets the member of parliament, like why would you want my wife? What good is she to you? Why do you want to steal my wife? You know, all those things would form part of the action, the questions, the questioning, the inquiry, you know, apart from the confrontation, the insult, the assault, the questions. part of the action and activities that Kimani does. Then, in the same breath, still on number 3, remember number 1 was what is the event? Number 2, who are the characters involved? Then number 3, what actions or activities do they do? And under actions and activities, then also for every action, there's an outcome. So, what is the outcome? When Kimani decides to go and confront Walomo, what is the outcome? Talk about the outcome. He is demoted, he's arrested, he's locked up, he's demoted, he's dejected, he's weary, he lacks sleep, he quits teaching, it takes a physical toll on him. All those things are part of the action. The outcome. So actions go with outcomes. That is number 3. Then also look at the reactions of the characters. For every episode that you read, whether you're looking at Walomo, or you're looking at Kimani, or you're looking at Saif Tahir, or you're looking at Chiamaka, for everything they do, or anything that is done to them, there is a certain reaction. Let us go to Rahma's part, page 118. Let us talk about this person called Rahma Mahmoud. Let us go to the real action. And the real action is actually on page 121. That when she is slapped, page 121, when she is slapped by Kimani, Saif Tahir, she strikes back. And the author even tells us that had she stopped to think of the chain of events her reaction might set off, she would have restrained herself. Yet, in the heat of anger, she doesn't think logically. She reacts by reflex. She hits back on being hit first. So that idea talks about reactions. As a student, when somebody slaps you, what are you going to do? Are you going to hit back, or are you going to forgive this person? Are you going to, go and say, report to the teacher? If somebody slaps you, are you going to slap them back? Are you going to fight them? Are you going to wrestle them? So we are looking at the reaction of the characters. When somebody abuses you, when somebody calls you, you fat baboon, when somebody talks about wife stealing statistics, like in the case of Walom, when a president bans you from preaching, like in the case of Chiamaka, when somebody kills your wife, like in the case of Comrade Melusi, how are you going to react? The reaction of the character, not that. That is also another important thing that will help you build your paragraph. Then lastly, we have lessons or morals. Do you learn anything from the episodes? Like, for example, let us go to the page 75, Fathers of Nations still. That is a compulsory text. That is why we are dealing on the same. If we go to page 75, we meet somebody called Pamela. Pamela is Afolabi's wife. Pamela decides to, Pamela meets, the houseboy is called Isa. And when they come from America, and they find Isa in the house, and Isa is trying to block them from going to their bedroom. Pamela is tired. She has been in air, and she wants to go and sleep. And she's wondering, what's happening? And Isa is a Hausa. We have tribes in Nigeria. Africans are very, very fixated on their tribes. That I am a Hausa, I am a Yoruba, I am Igbo. Those are Nigerian tribes. In Kenya, the tribes. In Uganda, we have tribes. In South Africa, the same. So this person we are told in this case is Hausa. Afolabi himself is Yoruba. So when they get there, this houseboy does not allow them to go to their bedroom. And these are the employers. So they are shocked. They are surprised. Why is that? And at the end of the day, they realize we have strangers in the house. Go to page 76. Pamela is angry at Femi. The statement is very clear. She was already angry with him. This man with a scar on his face. This Yoruba man. And then she realizes that this man is the husband's cousin or whatever relative. And then this man has brought a woman into their house. And this man wants the husband to marry the woman so that they have children. And now Pamela is very angry. So underline the word angry. And then she chases Nimble, the lady that has been brought with a broomstick. So that can point to violence. She's violent. Okay, if she's violent, angry and violent, can we conclude something? That anger and violence eventually culminate. So nobody gets married with this person is shady and this person is a thief or a criminal. So in this case, that anger marriage do we learn anything can lead to problems or suffering because once you divorce, obviously both partners are going to suffer. Both part, and then when you look at the case of different, that he does not in action also leads to that rule that he shooted the wife or the cousin, but he appeared like he was in the middle. Ruling action can also lead to a question that says Afolabi betrays the wife. But I can also say the wife's anger and her violent nature also leads to the breakage of their marriage. Acts without thinking, she ends up in problems that 43 fathers and we up to 144. Comrade Melusi is planning to take revenge against that idea of trying to seek revenge against this leader of Zimbabwe also, costs him, leads him into trouble. Look at somebody. Professor Kimani says, I was born a teacher and I will die a teacher. Does he die a teacher? From his life, can we get a lesson that despite our best efforts, life doesn't always go as expected? Some of you students want to be doctors. But then the reality is that you may not actually end up as a doctor, but life goes on. Should you give up? Look at Saif Tahir. Saif Tahir actually has dreams of building nuclear weapons for Libya. That dreams collapses. When your dream collapses, should you also go down with it? Or should you understand that sometimes life doesn't always go as expected? Some of us want to be big business men or women in Kenya. Some of us want to be millionaires or billionaires, but life has other plans. If life doesn't go as we expect, what should we do? Can we learn from the story of somebody like Tuni? Tuni always knew that men are bad people, and she prepared for male violence, and she took classes and precautions, and then she dies in a road crash, not from male violence. And when she, even before she dies, the people that try to assist are the same men that she's fighting. But are men good or are they bad? Look at Fathers of Nations. It is actually accusing the fathers or the men of failing to govern Africa in the right way. Anyway, that aside, let us think about the lessons of the morals in the text. Don't think about the themes too much. Don't think about the character traits too much. Don't think about the styles too much. Don't think about the roles of the characters too much. Why? Those are important literary aspects, but they are good if you are studying for paper 2 excerpt. For paper 3, think about the lesson or the moral. Now, I also want us to look at how to respond to the questions. How do we respond to the questions themselves? Can we talk about how we can respond to a question at KCSE? If you're given a question, how do you respond to it? And at this point, I would like to share. I would like to share some questions with you. I was supposed to share them earlier, but then I've been held up to the time we began the lesson. So I want to just share the screen if possible, so that we can look at some of the questions that we can discuss as a group. And I want to begin with the questions on Fathers of Nations, which is our compulsory set text. So these questions are supposed to guide us. And these questions are supposed to, just a minute, I'm trying to share my screen. And in a minute, I'll have them up so that candidates can copy them. And then we can use the same questions in our discussion. Bwana Karaoke, I don't know if my screen is visible.
It is very visible, sir. It is very visible.
Thank you, sir. So these are the questions that I want us to use to guide us in our discussion. And if you can see the questions, now I want to take you through how to respond to these questions. You can copy them down. You can use these questions in your study. These questions are standard questions that we can expect at KCSE, but I also want to give you a caution that at this particular point, we are just looking at guides. And if you don't find the same questions at KCSE, still, these are guides. These can help you study and dissect the text itself. So, having looked at the questions, number one, I want you to consider this. You've read the text, you've mastered the content, you've been given a question. How do you go about answering the question? Number one, read the question carefully. Read the question carefully. Many candidates lose marks because they do not take time to read the question carefully. So the reason why you should read the question carefully is so that you can interpret it correctly. When I began, I said you must interpret that particular question correctly so that you can answer it according to the expectations of the examiner. That is number one. Number two, once you've read the question carefully, understood it, like for example, we have a question like citizens in a country with failed leadership face many problems. Have you understood the demands of the question? Do you know what the question was? You do, tick. If you don't, problems. Then number two, understand the demands of the question. You've read it correctly. Do you know what it demands from you? Do you know the test in the question? What task are you supposed to cover? I want you to take. I want to take you back to 2023. In 2023, we covered the Samaritan. 2024, I am dwelling on fathers of nations. Now, in 2023, the question was the success of any new idea aimed at bringing positive change depends a lot on determination. The success of any new idea aimed at bringing positive change depends a lot on determination. So, in that case, I want to break down the tasks for you to understand. Now, we had 4 tasks in that question. The success, up to there, number 4, I'll call it success. Students can write down number 1, 2, 3, 4. Then let us go bit by bit. So, as I read the question, I'm going to also highlight the tasks. So, the question said, the success of any new idea aimed at bringing positive change. So, the first thing you underline and write down is success. So, in your answering, we have to say success. The success of any new idea. So, go back to number 1 and write new idea, or you can just write idea. The success of any new idea aimed at bringing positive change, we're still at idea, depends a lot on determination. So for number 2, you write down determination. That is another thing the examiner was looking for. All these things I'm saying are in the question. They are in the question. So determination. Then there is a number 3 that we have not touched. Everybody knows that you cannot be determined unless you have a challenge. You know, if you have a challenge, if you have a problem, if you have a hurdle, if you have an obstacle, then you have to be determined to overcome this obstacle. Like for the students, you are up now at around 8:40. You'd be enjoying on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram, but you have to be here listening to this lesson because you have a challenge ahead of you. You have a task. You have a hurdle, which is KCSE. So for you to overcome that, you have to be determined. You have to make some sacrifices. So in this case, we shall talk about number 3, call it obstacle. So that question had 4 tasks. The student has to identify the idea, which is the Samaritan. They had to identify Nicole's determination. They had to identify the obstacle. For example, the mayor, I know you've read this text for paper 2. The mayor, Mayor Mosi or Atunya, refused to launch the Samaritan. That is an obstacle. Miss Narin, the principal, dissuaded Nicole from pursuing the cause of the Samaritan. That is an obstacle. Alvita and Montana told her to transfer to another school and they'll follow her there. Around page 50, 51, 52. That is an obstacle. They offered her a job, Director General. That is an obstacle. Mayor Mosi even wanted to give her a bribe and told her, name your prize. And that is where we can tell that, is Nicole really a Kenyan? Because most Kenyans would have accepted. And as we go into CBC, we're teaching values, integrity, honesty, responsibility. Nicole is a perfect example of a CBC student. She refused and said, how can you offer me a bribe? So that is an obstacle. Bembe, try to arrest that. That's an obstacle. Anyway, that's last year's question, but I wanted to use it as a precursor or as build up to help you understand the idea of the test. Let us use the questions we have on our screen. In life, we might feel that people have treated us unfairly. Number one, task as a student, ask yourself, in Fathers of Nation, who do you feel is treated unfairly? Andika chini, who is treated unfairly? Who is treated unfairly? Number two, as we continue the question, but if we try to revenge, Andika, revenge, who seeks, even before we go to revenge, give details of the unfair treatment. Number two, so we talk about the details of the unfair treatment. For example, I can say I feel okay, Kimani is treated unfairly. Why? Details? Give me details. Why do you say Kimani is treated unfairly? Walomo, his former junior colleague, steals his wife. So if you steal my wife, I'll feel like, why are you treating me unfairly? Is it fair? You go look for your wife. Why steal mine? And you already have three. That is unfair. My wife is old. Why take her? I'm old. I need somebody to take care of me. That is unfair treatment. Then, still on the same Kimani story, when Kimani goes to Walomo's office, Walomo starts insulting him, mocking him, humiliating him, making fun of him. That mockery is also unfair treatment. So under the same, I will discuss details of the unfair treatment. Kimani's wife is stolen and Kimani is mocked. The wife is stolen and he is mocked. That would also form part of the. As we continue, but if we try to revenge, underline revenge, when he feels that Walomo has mistreated, he abuses Walomo, he tries to fight Walomo. That is the third test that the examiner is looking for. Then you continue and say, we could end up making things worse for ourselves. Things are bad for him because if you're a husband and somebody takes your wife, that is bad. Then when you go to his office, he starts making fun of you. That is bad. But can it get you give details of the suffering in the case of Kimani? Is he demoted? Is he arrested? Is he locked up for 6 months? Is he dejected? Does he lose sleep over the fame? Does the whole scheme of things take a toll on him? Page 144. Everything in his body is loose. The face is loose, the stomach is loose, the skin is loose. Then page 155, he's crying, the cry of the aggrieved. I wish I had my text here so that I could read, but I just remember something like, his greetings to the heads of state were a tearful cry of the aggrieved. Teachers deserved respect. And he talked about path alpha, blah, blah. So that is actually another example of how revenge leads to suffering. So question one that you're seeing on your screen, I'll only need who is unfairly treated. Number two, details of the unfair treatment. Number three, details of the action, which is the revenge. Number four, the suffering of that particular character. That is enough. So that is the task in the question. Read the question carefully. Identify the test in the question or identify the task in the question. What does the examiner demand? That is number two. Number three, underline the key words. What are the key words in the question? So we have 6 questions on our screen. I'm going to send Mr. Karaoke questions in the other texts for your future reference. And if you have maybe any concerns, he'll get back to me, and then he'll know how to maybe feed you with the same, but we can still do it in this lesson. But anyway, for the questions we have on the screens, can you identify any keywords? Maybe I want to allow one student to look at question 6. Which question? Let me see which question is best suited for something like that. Question 2. One of you should, can one of you unmute your mic and tell me, can you identify any keywords in question 2? If you can identify even all of them, just unmute yourself and tell us so that we can proceed. Just 5 seconds, please. Anyone?
If you think Kate has raised her hand. Kate?
Okay.
Citizen,
Okay, please go ahead.
citizen,
Citizens, good.
failed
Mhm.
leadership,
Fair leadership, very good.
and problems,
Problems, very good.
and conviviality.
And comrade Melusi. Perfect. Thank you. You can mute your mic now. Thank you so much. That is perfect. Think about the citizens. Think about the failed leadership. Think about the problems. Then the question has tied you to Comrade Melusi. So, as a candidate, underline those keywords. I think I didn't get your name, but you've done it perfectly. Once you have underlined those keywords, those are going to guide you throughout the answering of the questions. The keywords, underline the keywords. So for every point, those keywords that she has mentioned have to be touched on. Whether you paraphrase it, whether you use your own words, but at the end of the day, the idea has to be felt. Citizens, failed leadership, problems, and then the context has to be Comrade Belusi's story, which is on page 82 up to page 99. Okay, that is the main story. We meet him later on, even on page 174. We meet him page 155 to 156. But the main story was 82 to 99. So get the keywords. Just to solidify that idea on identifying the keywords, can somebody identify keywords on question 1? Somebody else? Our moderator, I can't see the Zoom. I'm still on this other screen. So if anybody maybe...
I can see Sylvia has
Yes,
unmuted.
please.
Sylvia, do you want to identify? She has
Sylvia,
muted
please.
again. If you can, kindly raise your hand. If you
Anybody
can do the
that
task,
can...
the teacher.
Anybody that can identify keywords in question 1?
I can see Ruby. Ruby Jerry has raised her hand. Ruby, go on.
Jerry, go on.
Okay. A trial.
Yes, Jerry.
If we try to revenge.
So the word is revenge.
Revenge.
Any other
Then
word that
making
was?
the other word is making things worse for ourselves.
Good, was. So we can underline the was, worsening, was. Any
and
other?
sorry, in the first line, we might feel that people treated us unfairly.
So we underline unfairly. Very, very, very good. Thank you, Njeri. So that is excellent. The idea of unfairly. So you underline the word unfairly or treated unfairly. Also talk about revenge. and talk about when things get worse. So I think the concept of keywords is clear from our two candidates that have actually helped us identify. So in your case, underline the key words, just like we've done in the two examples. Now, let us move to point number 4. Point number 4 is very, very important, and I want us to dwell on the same. And here you have to identify the actions of the characters. You have the keywords. Now, at the back of your mind, ask yourself, what do the characters do? Our main characters in this text are Kimani, we have Afolabi, we have Melusi, we have, of course, that is Comrade Melusi, we have Saif, Tahir, we have Pastor Chiamaka. Those are 5. Then we have the guide. But these 5 are the key characters in our text. They build a plot. So if you have these 5 people, can we talk about their actions, what they actually do? What do these characters do? Like, for example, what does Kimani do? What does Afolabi do? What does Melusi do? What does Tahir do? What does Chiamaka do? But also the people around them. What does Asia Omondi do? What does Tuni do? What does Pamela do? What does Femi do? What does the bomber, in the case of Melusi, do? Those are the actions. What does Rahma do, in the case of Saif Tahir? What does the president of Nigeria do? What does Chiamaka's audience do? In the case of Melusi again, what do the Ndebeles do? What does the bomber do? So those are the actions of the characters. You must master or think about the actions of the character. Like, for example, in our first question, if we might feel unfairly treated, but if we try to revenge, that revenge is the action. So who seeks revenge? What actual action do they do? That, like for Kimani, you have to talk about him confronting Walomo, abusing Walomo, insulting Walomo. Those are the actions. For Saif, slapping Rahma, that is the action. For Chiamaka, criticizing the government and the president. Ata sahi Kenya sahi, if you criticize the president, something is going to happen to you. Not just Kenya, go to Uganda, try Uganda, do the same. Go to Tanzania, criticize the president. Even our own Kenyans who went to Tanzania and criticized the government and the operations. So it is actually contemporary. You can learn from Chiamaka's story. Afolabi, what does Pamela do? What does Afolabi do? Afolabi is in action, or him siding with the relatives, or Pamela's angry reaction. So talk about the actions of the characters. Like, lack of self-control can result in unwanted consequences. That idea of lack of self-control is what we're calling the action. So go to the text and think about what is the character's action. And then talk about number 5, talk about the outcomes. The outcomes. Actions have outcomes. Now, for outcome, this is where many of us lose marks. For example, if you're talking about question 1, revenge can make things worse. Let us begin. Okay. Anybody to tell us any character in the text that seeks revenge? Just unmute yourself and tell us, is there any character that seeks revenge?
Lydia's hand. Lydia. Let us start with Lydia, then we go to Angela, then we go to Ontita.
Comrade Melusi.
Melusi, good. Any other? I've had other students mentioned. Any other person that seeks revenge?
Safe Tahir.
Tahir, very good. Thank you. Any other? One more.
Professor Kimani.
Imani, good. Let us work with those ones. Thank you. You can now mute your mics. So the first character that's mentioned is Melusi. So if you're talking about the outcome in the case of Melusi, or the suffering in the case of Melusi, we have to go to page 155. If you have your text, please turn to page 155. That is where he takes the action. But when he takes the action, on one page, page 156, we are told his intention then was to avenge his wife Ziliza. Before he could carry it out, guards seized him by the collar and whisked him away. So that is the outcome. He is seized by the collar and whisked away. I don't know if there's anybody that would like to be seized by the collar and whisked away. Then you can also turn to page 174. Page 174. And then ask yourself, still on the outcome, what happens to him? After his arrest the evening before, he had not yet resurfaced. I don't know if I'm getting it right. I'm just trying to recall. After his arrest the evening before, he had not yet resurfaced. So the fact that he was grasped by the collar, whisked away, not yet resurfaced, can we say that he was detained? So that is the outcome of the fact that he lacked self-control, and then he was taken away and he disappeared. He was abducted. Hata sahi, try attacking the government, not just in Kenya. Go to Uganda and try the same. Go to Tanzania. You can be whisked away and you will not resurface. And we've seen it. In Kenya, we've called that abductions and whatnot. So that is Melusi. Look at Tahir. If we look at Tahir, and Tahir is important, very important. And I want you to turn to page 100 and if we go to 121, if you look at page 121 on Tahir, Rahma strikes back. So for Tahir, we have the outcome or the suffering of the problems is not just physical. Many of us lose marks because we focus on the physical. We just talk about Tahir losing the eye and we stop there. That he lost the eye and we stop there. That is not enough. Losing the eye is just the beginning of the problems. Many candidates tell me that lack of self-control can result in unwanted consequences. Tahir lacks self-control. When Rahma rejects him, she slaps Rahma, and then Rahma slices the eye. He loses the eye. Then we cry that he has lost the eye and it ends there. But look at the book. Does the outcome end there? Do we have more details? Why do you end at him losing the eye, the left eye? Why don't you go ahead and give us more details? Because, okay, we are told on page 121 that she struck back. And on page 122, a letter opener. Some of you tell me that Rahma slapped Tahir. Rahma did not slap Tahir. That is inaccurate. That is not true. Rahma struck back using a sharp object called a letter opener. And that letter opener is what destroyed Tahir's left eye. That is not the outcome. The outcome is that one, physically, he lost the eye. Number two, he spent a month in hospital. Capture that. Page 122. He spent a month in hospital. still on the same page. When he came from the hospital, he was bitter. He was vengeful. That is also part of the outcome. That is part of the problem. That is part of the suffering. That is part of the anguish. That is part of the agony. That is part of the ulceration. But still on the same outcome for Tahir, you can also add that bitterness makes him go to court. When he goes to court, he wins the case. But even after winning the case, he is still restless. And if you're on page 122, you can see, did vengeance by engineer Tahir peace? No, in fact, he was even more restless now. Capture that, the restlessness as part of the outcome. Then you move to page 123, and you see that apart from being restless, that Libyan women are shedding off their head veils in public, he sinks into a deep gloom. And gloom, GLOOM, simply means sadness. He is extremely sad. All of us have been happy at some point. All of us have been sad at some point. He is extremely sad to the point that even when his friends try to talk him out of the gloom, he does not listen to them. The friends tell him,
Well, on that,
so
somebody
yes.
has asked, and I think this one you may answer: is Rama's reflex action, can it be accounted for as revenge?
It is revenge. It is revenge. It can be accounted as revenge. If you ask a question on revenge, let us also pick it as revenge, because she is slapped, and whatever she does, she actually. I'll take you to an actual page where we can see that it is revenge, and that is she actually says she was provoked into doing that when taken to court. She claims that she was provoked, and that is why she did what she did, and that is 122. And she pleads innocence, and she says that it was temporary insanity. She was mad because she was extremely provoked. That provocation. So Rahma is saying that the we are asking ourselves, as now we are talking to students, and most of our students are maybe 20 years old, 21 and below. So ideally, you're talking maybe 14 to 18 or so. So if let me assume I'm talking to somebody who's 17 years old or 18 years old, or maybe 14 or 15, are we saying that if I provoke this person, it is okay for them to pick a knife and slice my eye? It's okay for them to pick a piece of glass and slice my eye? So we are just trying to tell these 17-year-olds or these 15-year-olds that it is good to control yourself. Because if you lack self-control, you can end up in problems. We have seen young women, very beautiful young women, very handsome young men with bright futures, who maybe act out of lack of self-control or anger, and then they end up in prison for years because they you can call it manslaughter, but it ends up as murder, and then they have given 25 years in prison or life imprisonment. So for her case, it is actually revenge, because she does it because of their provocation. I don't know if that the question is answered now. Somebody had asked that question? Do you feel I've given the answer?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we proceed. So for Tahir, for the case of Tahir, I was still explaining and saying that we do not just stop at that physical, we go to emotional. So the idea that the deep gloom and the friends talking to him, that is emotional turmoil, that is emotional problems. And sometimes I even joke and say, well, the friends must have been telling him, listen, Tahir, okay, you've lost your left eye. You still have the right eye. Why don't you use the right eye to look for another woman? And maybe that is what provoked him to move from Tripoli, which is the capital of Libya, to Benghazi. And Tripoli and Benghazi are both in Libya. So do not say that he left Libya altogether and went to Benghazi. He left Tripoli and went to Benghazi. It's just like leaving Nairobi and going to Mombasa, because you don't want your friends to tell you, okay, you lost your left eye, you use your right eye to look for another woman. But please don't write that. That is just my own thinking. So if you can go all the way to the point where Tahir leaves Tripoli and goes to Benghazi, that you have captured the outcome. Now, another character where you lose marks is Kimani. Because for the case of Kimani, his problems or the outcome begins on page 38. And on page 38, we see that he is arrested first. So talk about the arrest. Number 2, he is charged with assaulting a member of parliament. Then number 3, he is demoted from professor back to lecturer, senior lecturer. Then number 3, we can talk about the idea that the demotion, the university talks about it is a punishment for disgracing the university in the eye of the public. Then he is jailed for 6 months. And don't tell me that he was arrested for 6 months. You cannot arrest somebody for 6 months. You arrest them immediately. But the jailing is 6 months. And then when he's set free after 6 months, he is dejected, very sad, frustrated, humiliated. In fact, even the walking is described as putting foot ahead of foot. Not walking, but putting foot ahead of foot. Then his career is doomed beyond revival. So you should also capture that. The career, the idea that he loved teaching. He loved teaching so much. I was born a teacher, I'll die a teacher. But on page 38, we are told that that career that he loved is doomed beyond, it cannot be revived. The idea that he goes from professor back to senior lecturer, and that tag of a disgrace to the university is hanging on his neck, actually can be part of the outcome of the suffering. So many of you just stop at he was demoted, he was arrested. Then you don't give me the details of after he comes from jail. How does he feel? Dejected, putting foot ahead of foot, career doomed beyond revival. Then on the same page, he's weary from lack of sleep. And that problem is recurring. So, sometimes, for you young people, you may not understand, but for people that are older, sometimes you cannot even sleep because you are thinking of school fees, you are thinking of this, you're thinking of that, you're thinking of this and that, bills and whatnot, economy imekuchapa. So you can't even sleep. So other people go to sleep, people are snoring, your wife is snoring like an old generator, but you are just awake because you are thinking, what are they going to eat? How are we going to pay rent? If you're living in rental houses, how are we going to pay rent? How am I going to pay fees for my daughter or my son who's in Form 4, Form 3? So that is Professor Kimani. And these problems are because of revenge and all those, because the daughter is dead, the wife has left him, but the problems have become deeper after his career is also dead. So you talk about his weary from lack of sleep, the weariness, the insomnia, and then you go to page 45, and then you say another outcome in the case of Kimani, the fact that, and you can just go with the author. So I don't want to come up with my own book. The loss of the daughter, the desertion by the wife, mistreatment by the university and the state. They had tested him hard and long. But here, we'll talk about, forget about the loss of the daughter. He couldn't control that. The desertion by his wife, the mistreatment by his university. All those came because of revenge and the state. And then this had tested him hard and long, and he had reached a breaking point. He used to think he was born to teach and to die a teacher. Such was not the case anymore. All he wanted was to walk away without saying goodbye and run and never come back. So that idea, if you just forget about those many words, just tell me what of the outcome that he quits teaching. He loved teaching so much, but now he has decided to quit teaching. That would also form part of the outcome of the problems that he was facing. And then we can also talk about page 144. If you go to page 144 and you look at the physical state of Professor Kimani, how he looked, everything in his body was loose. That would also inform us about the problems. You can see that his belly hung over his belt like a half-empty sack, loose, physical toll. You can pick that as part of the outcome. And lastly, on page 155, the way he was crying, the cry of the aggrieved, saying teachers deserve respect. I actually support him there, that teachers deserve respect. Look at your teachers even now. They have organized this session now. In the middle of the holiday, even at night, and we are here and we are still learning. And of course, surely, if people sacrifice this much, the least you can give them is respect. Professor Kimani feels like he does not get the respect that he needs. That page 155. So all I'm saying is that when it comes to outcomes, please give enough outcomes. Now, we've dwelt on that so much also. I want to take you back to where we began. Read the question carefully. Identify the test or the tasks in the question. Underline the keywords. Give details of the character's actions. Give details of the outcomes. And then, finally, now, come up with what we call points of interpretation. Come up with what we call points of interpretation. Come up with points of interpretation. Now, still on the same, I want us to go back to question 1. If you copied question 1, I want us to go back to the same. And I don't know if you can see it. I want to share it again so that we see question 1 and we use it. We are almost coming to an end. Question 1. What are the points of interpretation? I will quickly run through them. So you simply just write down maybe 1 to 6, because we want 4 points, but you can go up to 6 as long as you stick to 3 pages of your KCSE booklet. Don't go beyond that. 3 pages of your KCSE booklet. And 1, you talk about, like in question 1, you'll talk about who seeks revenge, Tahir, against Rahma. What does he do? He slaps Rahma. Question point 2, Tahir again, against Rahma. What does he do? He takes Rahma to court. 3, Kimani, against Walomu. What does he do? Confronts him, abuses him, tries to fight him. And then you go to Tahir. What does he do? Tahir, we've already talked about him. Melusi tries to attack the leader of Zimbabwe, the bomber. That aside, then you talk about Rahma with an H at the end. Slices Tahir's eye. Then you talk about the Ndebele. When their leader is sacked, they attack government supporters. Then they suffer. Then other people also add Chiamaka, because Chiamaka wanted to revenge against the president of Nigeria, although the scheme failed. But those first 6, are solid points on revenge. So list them first. Once you have them down, then you can move ahead and try to answer the question. We are at 9:20 and we go up to 10. We will have maybe a few minutes for questions if the moderators will allow us to do the same, or even just allow them to end the session with the conclusion. But I have something else to tell you before we get to the end. Once you have come up with points of interpretation, I want us to talk about the structure of the essay itself. I've dwelt on reading the text. I've dwelt on answering, interpretation and answering of the question. I want now to talk about the structure of the essay. And I know this, your teachers have told you, but I want to simplify it. I want to make it as simple as possible. And by the way, do you know that
Linus, please mute.
many candidates actually score? Do you have a question?
All right, sir. Sorry for that. Please
Okay.
proceed.
I also want, yes, I want to also tell the candidates that many students actually score 20 out of 20 in paper 3, especially last year, 2024, we were given a leeway to score the candidate. And by the way, I have a blog. This blog is called wekati.blogspot.com. And I wrote a question. The first question, I want you to go and look at the KCSE question for 2024. And I want you to go and compare that with the question on my blog. I don't have the markings. I can't share the marking scheme. We didn't get it. They are confidential material. Sometimes they leak, but I haven't seen it online. But if you can go and compare the question and look at the answers I gave, they were so similar. And I want to say that I have any answers, please. But then,
sorry,
you yes.
a student has said, please pardon the blog.
Oh, let me post it on the chat box.
All right.
For their sake.
Then another one. Then another one has asked, can you write about one person in 2 different ways and still get your full marks?
Now, let me respond. I've posted the blog on the chat box. Let me respond to that question because I know that one is talking about probably Tahir in this case. So revenge. When you seek revenge, you are going to suffer. If somebody does something wrong to you and then you decide to revenge as a student, for example, somebody steals your money, instead of going to the deputy principal or the principal or your class teacher to report, or the boarding mister or mistress to report, you decide to ask some of your friends and you beat that person up, and then you're suspended, and then you miss some exams, and then you are told now that you've missed exams, you need to do this and this, you're punished. So you suffer because of that revenge. Let us look at Tahir. So for revenge, look at the action and the outcome. So what action does Tahir take when he feels that Rahma has rejected him? Tahir, let me just give you a small background on Tahir because that is the person that has 2 points to answer that question. Tahir is a person that is an engineer. This engineer loves grenades, he loves guns, he loves weapons, he loves RPGs, that is rocket propelled grenades. He loves bazookas and such things. He does not have enough time to interact with ladies or women. So he does not know how to talk to Rahma, a beautiful woman. Her name means kind in Arabic. So when she goes and talks to this lady, the lady says yes, but he does not understand the yes. He thinks it is no. What does he do? He's irritated. I'm asking you out for tomato soup and you say no. Vows to retaliate, slaps the lady. So that slapping is the first action. that he takes. That slapping is the first revenge that he takes. We can now say, point one, Tahir slaps Rahma. That is the revenge. What is the outcome? He loses the eye. Point two, Tahir takes Rahma to court. That is another revenge on its own. What is the outcome? Does it buy him peace? We read that bit. Does it buy him peace? We read that bit on page 122. Does the vengeance buy him peace? Oh, he becomes even more restless. The social and the physical suffering begin on page 122. So yes, one character can answer both questions, but only if you have details on the action and the outcome. Last year, we had one character that was the key point. That was Miss Nicole or Teacher Nicole. But we have 2 points on one character, and that character is called Mosi. Mosi refuses to launch the Samaritan app. That is 1 point. As an obstacle to Nicole's determination, he refuses to launch Samaritan. So you decide, you give the action. What does Mosi do? Anakataa to launch Samaritan. And then, does he suffer? Yes. Eventually, Nicole is still determined, and Mosi is arrested. Mosi is worried. Mosi is anxious. Number two, Mosi tries to bribe Nicole and says, name your prize. That is another action that he does. Does he succeed? No. Another obstacle. So to the student that asked that, it is possible, but please interpret the question yourself and see, do we have an action? Do we have an outcome by the same character? So in this case, Tahir has been split into two because we have an action and an outcome. But if not, stick to one character. One character. But it is possible. So it all depends, like I began by saying, on your interpretation of the question. Whoever had asked that question, please, you can unmute yourself and tell us if you're satisfied with the explanation so that we move.
There is a question somebody has asked here persistently. Can one be penalized for skipping lines while writing the essays?
For thin lines.
For skipping
Come
lines.
again?
The question is, and I think this person has asked this question otherwise, can someone be penalized for skipping lines while writing the essay?
I would like that they unmute themselves and elaborate on what they mean, because I don't understand by what they mean on skipping lines. Malima, I don't know if you've understood and you can simplify. Skipping lines. Skipping which line?
I think if I try to understand, Sigilai, if this is not what you mean, you will kindly unmute and ask. But I think she's asking, or he is asking, about the block and the indented paragraphing. So perhaps you may advise from that perspective.
Oh, no. In fact, that's the best. If you're writing an introduction, from the introduction, skip a line before you write your first point. When you write your first point, skip a line before you write your second point. Go all the way to the fourth point or the sixth point. Then skip a line before you write your conclusion. That is okay. That is okay. There's no penalty for that. There's no penalty for that. So I hope that question is answered. Thank you for clarifying, Bwana Karaoke. We go to the introduction now. I want to finish by talking about three things: the introduction, developing the body paragraph, and the conclusion. And then we can go to the comment boxes and maybe answer the questions that are there. And I'm very, very grateful for to Malimo for highlighting some of the questions in the course of the presentation. So I want to talk about the introduction. Many teachers talk about the different types of introduction. I'm going to take a different approach. There is no logical reason for us to learn about many different types of introduction. All you need to know is what an introduction is and what the examiner wants from your introduction. That is enough. Knowing whether it is general, specific, blah, blah, is not important according to my assessment as someone who marks the paper. So if introduction is 2 marks. Now let us talk about how to grab all these marks. Give the examiner your understanding of the question and do it in your own words. So for the introduction, it's more or less like, tell me how you've understood the question. What is your understanding of the question? Have you understood the question? Yes. So tell me your introduction of the question. Then do it this way. Capture the keywords. Capture the keywords. In your introduction, ensure you capture the keywords. And how do you do that? Give the synonyms of the keywords. Give the synonyms of the keywords. Now, for example, if we talk about revenge, you can say retribution, you can say retaliation, you can say paying back, you can say an eye for an eye. All those words can mean revenge. Now, for a question, for a word like problems, you can talk about suffering, difficulties, challenges, suffering, anguish, agony, etc. So, can you think of another word that can be used instead of the keyword? So, give synonyms of the keywords. In the same breath, also mention a relevant character. Like, for example, if you're talking about lack of self-control, in your introduction, mention 1 or 2 characters whom you feel lack self-control. If we talk about anger or violence, talk about 1 or 2 characters who act angrily or violently. So that would actually that is mentioning a relevant character. So identify the keywords or capture the keywords, then use the synonyms of the keywords. As much as possible, avoid using the same words in the question, but we will get to a point where we are not saying that if you mention revenge in your introduction or the words, the keywords, that you lose all the marks. That is not what I'm saying, and I'll explain in a short while. Now,